finally, our last story of the evening comes from the Asia Times, and it's by Pepe Escobar, who will be joining us shortly. The U.S. GCC, Fatal Attraction. GCC stands for Gulf Cooperation Council, the club of 6 wealthy Persian Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, founded in 1981, and which in no time configured as the prime strategic U.S. backyard for invasions of Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003. And for the long drawn-out battle of the new great game in Eurasia, and also as the headquarters for containing Iran. So we have a map here of the countries shown in there and their strategic importance. You can see Iran right north of there, but they're Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. And we have some very lucrative deals with these guys. In fact, they're probably keeping us running with some of their deals. We got in Saudi Arabia, $67 billion arms deal. UAE, we sell them bunker-busting bombs. Oman, Stinger missiles. Kuwait, well, we got 15,000 troops there. And Bahrain, we have a $53 billion arms deal, but it hasn't gone through yet because of their ridiculous human rights violations. So that brings us to this next quote. The rationale for this weaponized orgy is provided by the usual suspect logic, the necessity of building a coalition of the willing to counter Iran. Why Iran? Because Iran is not part of the GCC, that is a pliable U.S. strategy, just like those jolly good times under the Shah. And with more on the U.S.'s dealings in the Middle East and probing up into Iran, we turn to our, I guess he's kind of our foreign correspondent now, ad hoc from the Asia Times, Pepe Escobar. How's it going, sir?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me. Great
Thanks for joining us. We missed you yesterday, but we're glad you could join us today. And we know it's a weird time difference and everything, but you look great. How are things going in Iran? What's going on?
Oh, where to start, in fact? Okay, let's start with the letter that President Obama sent to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. This has been all over the Iranian press for the past 48 hours at least. First part of the letter, according to some parliamentarians who actually read it, is threats. Just threats. Second part of the letter is basically roll over and die. This means Iran has to accept the UN sanctions, the unilateral US sanctions, stop enriching uranium to 20%, and then everybody sits down and start talking. So what kind of diplomacy is this, you know?
That's a gun to your head diplomacy, essentially.
Exactly. It's the roll over and die school of diplomacy. You know?
Yeah.
So the thing is, they would be willing to talk to the P5+1, as they call it. This means the 5 members of the UN Security Council plus Germany. These discussions were rudely interrupted almost a year ago. They would be willing to go back to the table if they are respected in terms of this. They are signatory of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, so they are allowed to enrich uranium for civilian purposes and in their own territory. But even, remember, 2 years ago, when Brazil and Turkey brokered a swap agreement, uranium would be enriched, then transferred to Turkey, and then back to Iran. The Brazilians and the Turks, they spent 18 hours non-stop in Tehran discussing with them this swap agreement, and they clinched a deal. So this means that it's possible to clinch a deal with their nuclear program. They have to be respected as a regional power. And the U.S. strategy, whatever the government in power, Bush administration, Obama administration, doesn't matter. It's, you know, like we were just mentioned, threats, sanctions, threats, and the roll over and die approach. It will never work.
It's like the Teddy Roosevelt puff up your chest and, you know, carry a giant stick and use it.
Exactly. So, and in one of the pieces that I wrote this week for Tom Dispatch, there's the red line angle, which for the U.S. is always very important. The problem is the red line is shifting all the time. It used to be you cannot enrich uranium. Then it changed. Leon Panetta said that like 2 weeks ago. You cannot build a nuclear bomb.
Right. And he says we know they're not building a bomb.
Is everybody who is not even an expert, you know, apart from the National Intelligence Agency, apart from the IAEA inspectors, everybody knows that they are not building a bomb. And the Supreme Leader himself, he had a fatwa ruling edict, where he explicitly said that building a nuclear bomb or possessing nuclear weapons is anti-Islamic. And these guys, they follow their religious code, the Shiite religious code, very strictly. And Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, he was saying that from the beginning, 79, 80, and during the Iran-Iraq war during the 80s, all the time, we will never build a nuclear bomb. It's anti-Islamic. So the point is, why do they really need a nuclear energy? It's to free the oil that they have. They produce, they export 2.5 million barrels of oil a day to export it to gain foreign currency. And they have refinement problems as well because of the sanctions, especially. So they have a case, and on top of it, they're signatory of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Everything that they do is monitored by the IAEA. There was an IAEA theme in Iran the last few days, and they are monitoring this new underground enrichment plant near the holy city of Qom as well. So anything that they do, the inspectors know what they're doing. It's impossible for Iran to build a nuclear bomb without the IAEA knowing. Absolutely out of the question.
Right, but instead of sitting down and talking, we've got U.S. commandos. This is out of the Atlantic Monthly, I believe. Yeah, the Atlantic Monthly group. Commandos are getting close to the Iran border. We've got scientists being assassinated. And then we have reports from Turkey saying that Iran plans to attack the U.S. embassy. And how credible is that?
No, this is completely stupid. First of all, the only thing that they don't want at the moment is to push for a confrontation. On the contrary, they are being pushed for a confrontation by both U.S. and Israel. And the regional players know it. Like in terms of Turkey, for instance, I'm talking about the highest levels. Turkish foreign minister, Davutoglu, he was in Tehran only a few days ago. And they were discussing that as well. And they were discussing ways of mutual cooperation in the future, including coming back to the table within the next few days in Istanbul, in Turkey, to talk to the Americans and Europeans again. But when you look at the letter we were discussing a few minutes ago, how are they going to discuss the rollover and die approach? It's impossible, right?
Right. Yeah. Man, Iran's not alone, though, in this battle. They've got some allies that are pretty big. You know, they've got China. Russia has already said that the U.S. should not attack. You know, what's going to happen if we do, in fact, if these commandos do start invading or get captured behind enemy lines? Is that going to be considered an act of war?
It is not only it is an act of war, but it will be a huge propaganda coup for them. Can you imagine if you have a commando in southeast Iran or southwest Iran, which are very, very touchy areas, or in the south near the Persian Gulf, where most of the oil and gas is? For them, it would be an enormous propaganda coup. And considering the mishaps in Afghanistan, it's not far-fetched to think that some of these commanders will be arrested sooner or later, right? Yeah. So the killing of scientists, can you imagine if these were Israeli scientists killed by Iran? We'll be already at World War III, right? But the other way around is permissible. So the double standards in terms of the West, they are cosmic, in fact. Now it's like a meteorite. It's obvious. So, but they are, what I'm getting from my sources in Tehran, the leadership, they are treading very carefully. They want negotiations. They won't be intimidated into a mishap or a fatal mistake, especially in the Gulf. The only way they would react really violently is if this oil embargo by the U.S. and the Europeans are meeting on Monday to decide about the oil embargo. If this is in effect starting in June, then they will react somehow. And it could be something related to the Persian Gulf, because then their backs will be against the wall. But they might not even react, because if they are dealing with, like in one of my pieces I talk about that, they are dealing with a lot of countries in their own currencies. So the petrodollar for Iran is over. And this, in the long run, for a lot of developing countries can be a great idea. Let's buy dollar in our own currencies or in a basket of currencies. So one of the reasons that the US hegemony all over the world is so strong is because of the petrodollar. And there are cracks already in this armor. A few days ago, Prime Minister of China, Wen Jiabao, went to visit what? The Persian Gulf itself. He went to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Emirates. They made a swap deal with the Emirates. A few $1 billion is just the beginning. But for the Chinese, they always say that, first you need a little stone, then you get the whole mountain. So the little stone is the Emirates already have yuan in their vaults as well. So they're going to be trading more and more in yuan with China. And that will include sooner or later oil. With Iran, China and Iran, they already trade in rial, the Iranian currency, and yuan as well. So can you imagine in a few years, lots of developing countries, apart from Iran, trading in oil and gas in their own currencies? So, this advantage, unfair advantage, many will say, that the U.S. has enjoyed for the past decades will be gone.
Yeah, it would lower the influence of the dollar for sure. Absolutely. And what kind of... We're basically buying our influence in there by providing arms that they can't build themselves into the GCC area that we went over with earlier in the show. What other details can you provide on that, other than that were in your article? We were talking about the $63 billion deal to Saudi Arabia, the missiles to, I believe it was Oman. You got the bunker busting bombs. Go a little bit into that.
Look, the basic data is in the story. It's the petrodollar and weapons trade. So you sell all your oil in dollars, and we provide you political cover and all the weapons, all the big toys in the world. Not the latest generation, though, because the latest generation always goes to Israel.
Oh, right.
They have the next latest toys, right?
They have the VCR and the beta decks, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. So the thing is, the leadership in the GCC, they are looking at the future, and they are seeing the erosion of the power of the dollar, the relative decline of the hyperpower. They're looking at the ascension of China. They're looking at the fact that they are trading with China more and more. Mm-hmm. So they start to hedge their bets, which is something that never happened until, I would say, a few months ago, or maybe a few days ago. In the future, Saudi Arabia already sells more oil to China than it sells to the US in proportion. So, sooner or later, they will be selling, I would say in a few years' time, they will be selling probably 40 or 50% of their exports. Oil exports will be to China, India, to Asia in general. So they see that the current is flowing from the Atlanticist West to Asia. Asia is the economic future. Mm-hmm. So they're hedging their bets, and sooner or later, maybe there will be cracks in the GCC-US relationship, because the US will look at the GCC and say, so even if we sell all our weapons to these guys, they're getting closer and closer to the enemy, the strategic enemy, which is China. So can you imagine? So we're projecting to 2020, 2025. So I guess a lot of people in Washington must be really, really worried, because you cannot go against this trend. It's inevitable.
Do you think they're going to try to preempt that and maybe strike sooner, and then to kind of garner that support from the GCC instead of waiting until they don't have that support anymore? The support can't be bought, essentially. Yeah,
look, I hate crystal balls, definitely. But the thing is, I don't think a strike would happen in an electoral year this year. Don't forget that this is an electoral year, not only in the US, but in Iran as well. They have parliamentary elections in March. Mm-hmm. And they are preparing for their presidential elections next year as well. If we have a Republican president in the US, I think the whole thing changes radically. If we have Obama too, Obama himself, remember from the beginning of the Obama mandate, he said, okay, let's try some kind of dialogue with Iran. Obviously, it has to be something different from the rollover and die approach, mm-hmm. of course. But considering that Obama he'll be on the second mandate, he'll be more or less free. he could even approach Iran with some real, possibility of a negotiation.